appears in each benchmark unit, and then also includes a table that defines when that standard has the greatest focus by the trimester or throughout the school year. The last document that goes with the grade level is the essential standards alignment. So what that one does, it takes the information from the detailed standards progression and the summary and puts that one into the color-coded document for the APS essential standards. So essentially what this does is it takes a lot of information and condenses it down sheet by sheet till you can get to a point where you can identify what you need and then how to get there. That's what this document is meant to do. Before we go into the examples, I want to take a pause for a second. And Taylor, I want to check in with you. Do we have any questions in the chat that I should address at this moment?
No questions yet.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to show you how to get to these documents. There's two ways that you can get to these documents for any grade level. One of the more obvious ways that people mostly use Google Sheets with are the tabs at the bottom. And each tab has the grade level first, and then the type of grade level document that it is. So kindergarten detailed is the kindergarten detailed standards progression, this document here. And it will continue for that for every single grade level. And it will always start with the grade level first, and then it will either be followed with detailed for this document, summary for the summary of the standards, and then essential for the essential standards alignment. We're going to take a look at an example of a detailed standards progression, a summary of the standards, and an essential standards alignment. The other way that you can also access these documents without having to look at the tabs below are on the blue text documents here. On the blue text, you can click on any of those and it will take you to the grade level that you would like to see. So if I want to go into the detailed standards progression for first grade, I just have to find the grade level, first grade. And we've even color coded these according to the colors that Benchmark has for them. And what we'll see underneath those are the 3 grade level documents. So here's what a detailed standards progression looks like. So just like it said in the introduction, on the far left-hand side in column A, you're going to see all the Common Core state standards. They're separated out by their strand, like reading, literature, speaking, and listening, by their substrand, and then by the exact grade level Common Core state standard. Now, here's the nice thing about this. While the standard is also listed right here, you could also click on this orange line where it lists the standard, and it will actually take you to the core standards website where that standard is specifically listed. So you have those options as well. Now, for example, in this row here, where we have retell stories, for example, if you look across the Google Sheet, you're going to see all the weeks that that standard is taught within the benchmark units. The benchmark units are listed in yellow here at the top, unit 1 through 10. And then what you can see are the specific weeks where that standard is taught by all the units. So you can see how a standard grows over time. Now, it's either going to say the objective that was listed in the scope and sequence, or it's going to say mentioned in unit lessons, meaning that it wasn't mentioned in the scope and sequence, but it is taught. And so what we've done is we've taken all that information from Benchmark and put it onto one Google Sheet here, so you don't have to constantly go through page by page, document by document. It's all here in one. And if you scroll down, you will continue to see those standards going through and being described throughout each unit. So it goes through all of them, including the language standards at the very end. So this one is a big document. and it contains a lot of information. So just looking at this, for some of us, our level of anxiety seeing this much information gets high immediately because we have so much information. So now what I'm going to show you is how we took that information and condensed it and made it easier to look at. So I'm going to go to the summary page. And I'm going to come back to the introduction here. So if I'm in first grade and I just saw that detailed standards progression, if I go to the space right below, I have the summary of the standards. So this is the document that takes all the details and condenses it into one document. So that huge document that we just saw with all this information and all these weeks where that standard is taught has now been put here into a color-coded document. We see all the units, same as before, and all that information that I just saw for this standard of retelling stories here has been put into this color-coded document. And the color designation table is here on the right side that tells you how often that standard is taught in a benchmark unit. So if the square is white, that standard is not present at all. If it's red or like that off shade red, it's minimally present 1 out of the 3 weeks teaches that standard. Yellow, 2 out of the 3 weeks, or 3 out of the 3 weeks. So in this color-coded document, you can see that some standards are taught very frequently, and then you can also see that for some standards, in particular, your language standards, I'm going to scroll down so you can see those. Your language standards, some of those language standards are only taught during a certain unit at one point in the school year. And so what this document can do is kind of help you figure out what needs to be taught when. If I can't do it all, what do I need to absolutely focus on? And what might be some of those underlying standards that can be taught with this content, but maybe might not be the direct focus. And so back up here at the top, I'm going to scroll back up so that way you can see the table on the right side. And on this table on the right-hand side, this tells you where the general focus is for each of those standards. So for example, when we look at this color-coded document and see how often that retell story standard is taught throughout the school year, it generally tends to be heavily present or somewhat present in most units throughout the entire school year. So this tends to be a focus standard for the entire school year in benchmark. Some are more heavily focused on in trimester 1. Some are more heavily focused in trimester 2. And some of them are reoccurring, meaning that they're not these standards that are always explicitly taught, but they're kind of those underlying standards that support everything else. So that one is helpful in identifying where the focus is going to be for some of these standards in benchmark. But then the question in July became, what about the essential standards? Now, for the essential standards alignment, that one is the third line below the grade level. The essential standards document took that table that we just saw in the summary document, and what it did is it color-coded it by essential, very important, and important, according to the document that APS developed in July of 2020. So now that focus document that you can see, now you have where the standards are the most heavily present in benchmark units, whether they are essential or not. And if you've been able to identify those, now you can go back to that detailed one and find the lessons that you need. This was just a very brief overview of this potential document, because the exploration of this document and the use of this document is going to be very specific to the needs of your teachers. You might not use it in the same way as another school might. So this is kind of like a commercial for this document. Now I want to pause here for a second, and Taylor, I want to ask if there are any clarifying questions that I should address at this time before I move forward.
I don't see any in the chat, but if anybody has any, go ahead and just throw them in the chat and we'll bring them up.
Okay. 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 So as people are thinking about those questions, what I do want to let you know is that everything I just talked to you about, you don't have to memorize. Okay. So and here's why. I'm going to come back to the tab that has my slideshow presentation, and I'm going to show you why here in just a second. In this slide deck, the 4 documents that are in this big Google Sheet, I broke it down into short 5-minute videos for each one. So if this is something that you want to take back to your staff members, but you're thinking, okay, I have really no idea on how to train on this or how to explain the components that are in this document, we have 4 videos here that will do that for you. And each of them are 5 minutes or less. I tried to be very explicit about making them 5 minutes or less. And so they have the introduction, which was that first sheet I showed you, the detailed one with all the standards and all the lessons, the summary, and the essential standards. So if you wanted to take this back to your school site and use this with your teachers, you have the explanations already prepared for you, along with this recording. Now, this huge document does ask us to kind of explore it a little bit and tear it apart, but we always want to have a specific purpose for it. And essentially, these are some ways that you could use this document with your school site and your teachers. You can really focus on identifying certain essential standards that are taught during the trimesters and the units. So that way, when you are collectively working together to develop lessons, you can really focus on hitting those essential standards. Now, for some of our students, we may look at some of these standards and think one is more critical than the other. So we might need to go looking for some lessons that really enrich and teach that standard deeply. This document can help support doing that. It can help create a curriculum map for the year or help you locate specific lessons to teach the essential standards. And then most importantly, it can identify if and or when those essential standards are reinforced later in the year or if they're only taught one time. So this kind of a document can be very helpful in kind of creating that big picture overview of what do I need to do to ensure that my students are making progress this year. And then of course there's the what then. Well, we have a couple of resources already available for you for the what then. If you've already identified those standards, if you've already identified those lessons, what then? Well, our teacher learning network here, our distance learning, we have some benchmark resources that have already been created within content modules to teach those essential standards. Specifically for Unit 1, which I know most people are starting to get into now, we have a lot of resources for that. Benchmark Universe also has distance learning activity slides. If you go into Benchmark Advanced Library, click on your grade, click on your unit, and then on the left-hand side, there's a button now called Distance Learning. If you click on Distance Learning on that left-hand side menu, it will show you these activity slides. Then, Benchmark also has tabs now for virtual learning and virtual professional learning from the dashboard in Benchmark Universe. Those buttons look like this. The primary difference being virtual learning has distance learning activities They are Google Drives with already prepared PDFs with comprehension, phonics, and writing activities. And then if you have staff members that still need more support in learning about the structure of Benchmark and Benchmark Universe, Benchmark 101 and Benchmark Tech Tools, the topics that we cover in those sessions are in this tab, Virtual Professional Learning, along with getting the year started. So they specifically share routines and community building lessons that teachers can do to support their students in getting ready for the benchmark curriculum that year. So now I want to take a moment, because I know this is a short session. This is kind of like a little infomercial for this document, but I really want to hear back from you about either something that resonates with you, something you'd like to look more deeply into, and specifically questions that you might have for us. And I want to open it up now to those questions and comments or anything that you would like to discuss at this moment.
So there's, you said there's those virtual learning tabs that have activities for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you can you assign them to Google Classroom, or I'm still like learning all this, and Seesaw, like I use Seesaw because I do second grade, but I also have Google Classroom, but and I haven't really looked at these activities yet, but I really want to look at them and get the teachers looking at them. So like, what's the best way to, I guess, to share this with the teachers? Like just maybe get them all together and kind of just look in there, and I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the things that you can definitely do is definitely look through and find specific activities. Actually, really interesting, if any of you have already signed up for the elementary flipped classroom, that's the next session here at 9 o'clock. You're actually going to see my colleagues Rachel Hortzman and Andrea Quintana use some of these virtual learning slides in the actual flipped classroom model. So they're actually going to show you examples of how it could be incorporated within Google Classroom and incorporated within Seesaw. Now, because some of these are PDFs, you may have to print them in a way that saves it to your Google Drive and then put it onto your Google Classroom or your Seesaw. You could also do some cut and paste options. There's a lot of different ways that you can take what Benchmark has created and put them into a format that is friendly for your students.
Okay. And so that's it. Are they going to show how to do that at the flipped classroom?
I'm not sure if they'll entirely show how to do that, but when we come to the very end, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can specifically request us to come out and work with your grade levels to do just that. Because I've already done that with a couple of schools, as I've actually sat down with them and shown them the specifics of, okay, this is how you can build a Google slide that's accessible for your students. This is how you can build an assignment that works with these tools. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I do see that Susan has a question about the Spanish language arts standards. Unfortunately, I don't have those for the Spanish language arts. We do have essential standards that LCE has published. One of the things that could be a really good collaboration is if you contact LCE, maybe there's a way that you all could, like, people can work together collaboratively to build this kind of a thing for the Spanish language arts programs that are available to you as well, because we do want to ensure that all of our students are getting the same, are getting the equitable curriculum as well. We want to make sure that everybody has their full support. Let's see. I do see a question about Benchmark Universe. Yes, there is definitely, there are definitely ways to get more support for Benchmark in connection with Google Classroom and Seesaw. Sometimes all it takes is just filling out a form to request us. And one of the nice things that's actually going to be coming here either by the end of this week or the beginning of next week is that every single school is going to have contact point people, somebody that's to directly email anytime you have a question, concern, request, inquiry. You're going to have somebody that you can email directly here at CNI, to where you don't necessarily always have to go through all the hoops and websites and everything. You can directly contact us, and we will be able to work with you and collaborate with you to support you and your teachers. Okay. Let's see. So now one of the things, let's see, let me go back to my slides here. One of the things, there is a feedback form. We want to fully encourage you to complete it after your final session today. We're going to be using any feedback that you give us to develop future professional development sessions, collaborative structures, how we can build systems of learning that will support everyone and our students. And so we really fully encourage you to use that feedback form. Now, on my last slide here, there are a couple of things here for you. This is my personal email address for this work that I do here at Curriculum and Instruction. So you can always feel free to send out an email specifically about these essential standards and ask questions about them. And then also that red button is from our Teacher Learning Network Hub website. It will take you directly to a ticket request, to where if you're looking more for kind of general support and you don't necessarily know who exactly to ask, you can always come to this support ticket request form, and it will get assigned to a member of our team who can support you with your questions, your inquiries, or your or anything that you would like to collaborate on. Now, I know it's about 8:16, and I'm already just a minute over time, but I wanted to fully encourage you to look at the resources that are on the agenda page. You already have every single link that I used for this already on that Google Doc. If anybody has any questions, I'll be here for a few more minutes. If you need to go to your next session and take a little bio break, I fully encourage you to do so. But once again, thank you all for joining me today. I know this was a quick little infomercial, but please feel free to use this document as you see fit. And thank you, Taylor, for sharing the Google Doc one more time. Have a great one, everybody.
Dr. Carrillo, hi, it's Rebecca.
Hi.